Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Very Cold Lasagna podcast, your filthy casual place for all the filthy casual takes on the world of sports. I am DylanLasagna, and this is episode number 140 of this icy yet spicy podcast. Today, we got a good one for you all because, well, it's draft week, ladies and gentlemen. That is right. It's officially draft week here in the world of sports, and funny enough, we have two drafts taking place this coming weekend, and one of those drafts that we're not going to be talking about is the WWE draft. Yeah, I don't know why WWE decided to have a draft on the same weekend on the draft that we're going to be talking about. The one that we are going to talk about, and that is, of course, the 2023 NFL draft. And for some football fans out there, yeah, this is like your little dose of, well, what we've been missing for the last 2 months since the Super Bowl ended. Seeing the future of what's to come, these future prospects, these players, or maybe busts, coming into the league and making a name for themselves. But for many others, they're just wondering, oh, cool. This new guy coming from college is going to be another addition. Maybe a good one, maybe a bad one. But either way, cool that they're coming in. They're going to get their proper introduction to the world. So that being said, we are here today in this episode to bring you, once again, the big filthy casuals guide to the 2023 NFL draft. That is right, ladies and gentlemen. And honestly, this NFL draft, unlike last year's, it's shaking up to be something interesting. I always say that with each and every episode. But I mean, with this NFL draft, I mean, it's always a good time. When you're looking at towards the future of the league. I mean, for as mixed as it can be. So anyway, we're here to talk about the NFL draft in this episode. What we're going to be doing is talking about each and every team in terms of what to expect from them, what they really need to address in this draft with how many picks that they have, and what their biggest need is, like their top addressing need that they have to nail in this draft. I'm not going to go into specifics of like what player they should absolutely get because, well, I'm like a lot of you out there. I'm just a big filthy casual fan and that doesn't really know a lot of these prospects. If you do want to know some of the prospects that I did scout, I did that in the last episode. Speaking of last episodes, go check out any of the last Very Cold Lasagna episodes that are out there, be it on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify for podcasters. Yes, that's a thing. And Google Podcasts or wherever Very Cold Lasagna is available, whether it's on video or on your audio preferred podcast platform. And of course, follow the show on social media, on Twitter and Instagram at Very Cold Lasagna. And make sure to rate and review the show on your audio device. Leave a comment, feedback. Anything is appreciated. And on the YouTube side of things, we've been going on with this Raw SmackDown like mini review-ish kind of series. It's still like a test run of whether or not I want to keep it going, because it's just basically this like 5 minutes or less highlight best of for the week when it comes to WWE Raw and SmackDown. So, I mean, so far, like, it's been, like, doing well in terms of engagement, views. But, like, behind the scenes, oh, man, that's another story, though. But anyway, make sure you go check out everything in relation to Very Cold Lasagna. And, yeah, we're just getting started here in the months to come. And hopefully it stays that way. So, that being said, let's talk about this NFL draft, shall we? It's taking place this coming week, starting this Thursday, from April 27th to the 29th. It's a 3-day event for those of you that don't know. It's 7 rounds. There's over 250 picks in this draft. And this time around, it's going to be held at the plaza of the Kansas City Union Station in Kansas City, Missouri. So that's obviously the state, the home of the Kansas City Chiefs. The reigning, defending, undisputed Super Bowl champions of this past year. Obviously, last year it was in Vegas. That was a good time. Let's see if Kansas City can make something happen this year. Make some memorable draft moments. trust me, there has been some crazy draft night moments. So as for who's going to be drafting on night one, that's what we're specifically going to be focusing on in this particular episode. And that is night one. Day one, round one is always the most important night. Now, not to say that day two, day three is not important, because there have been some gems in the later rounds. But obviously, the one that everyone focused so much on is the very first day of the NFL draft. Who's going to go number one? Who's going to go last on day one? That's what most people, especially the casual fan, focuses on the most. Like, who's going to be that first overall pick? Who's going to be that supposed franchise-defining player for whoever gets to be at the top spot in the draft? So anyway, in regards to what teams are going to be picking in this draft, 27 of the 32 teams in the NFL are slated to pick in the first round. The only teams that aren't going to be picking in the first round, so they'll have to wait, are the Denver Broncos, the Los Angeles Rams, the Cleveland Browns, the Miami Dolphins, and my San Francisco 49ers. They do not have a first round pick for various reasons that we'll be covering later on. And as the time I'm recording this, so things can change, multiple teams will either be looking to either trade up or down the board. So this happens a lot during the years of the draft, and it happens like even beforehand. We already had a trade a month before the NFL draft, but we'll get into that. So there are normally 32 picks in the first round of the draft, but this year there's 31 because of a situation with the Miami Dolphins where they were having tampering conversations with quarterback Tom Brady, who is now retired, and his agent, while Brady was signed with the Tampa Bay Bucks, and with Sean Payton, the former head coach of the New Orleans Saints, but he was still tied with this contract to New Orleans. So Miami had to forfeit their first round pick, and now there's 31 picks. So in terms of like who's the hot commodity, who's at the hot position in this year's draft? Well, compared to last year where it was not really a set position, like a set position of like what's the best available. This time around, the hot topic is all about the quarterbacks and which ones should be drafted in the top 10, and most importantly, the top 5. So the quarterbacks are going to be well off the board, past the top 7. So all those teams that are in the top 4, and maybe in the top 5, we better be thinking like, man, what's the best quarterback available? What's the best quarterback that fits my team so well? So as we transition over to the actual round of teams picking in the NFL draft, we now begin with the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers, who are picking number 1 overall in the 2023 NFL draft, starting in Kansas City. Now, funny enough, actually, for those of you that don't really follow football during the offseason, they actually were not slated to pick in this spot. This spot was actually supposed to go to the Chicago Bears, who finished with the worst record in the last season, the 2022 season. Their record was 3-14. But a month ago, we're going back to my prior point, the Carolina Panthers traded with the Chicago Bears. They made a deal to get the number 1 overall pick from Chicago. They basically did a pick swap. Carolina originally had number 9, but they wanted to go up and get number 1. And in doing so, they gave away that 9th overall pick, a first round pick for next year's draft, and their top receiver in DJ Moore, and a bunch more to go and get that top overall pick. They gave all that to the Bears. So going back to Carolina's season in a nutshell, they finished their season 7-10, and man, their season was kind of weird. Their first quarter of the season was a total crapshoot with Baker Mayfield underperforming and their former head coach Matt Rule, the fool, micromanaging the team, and that led to his firing. But once the interim head coach Steve Wilks took over, they played a little bit better. They had a strong defense, Sam Darnold, their initial starter, played pretty decently. He didn't do too terribly. They helped both of them helped Carolina stick around a putrid NFC South division race until they eventually lost the penultimate division game against the Tampa Bay Bucks, which ended their season. So looking back at Carolina's offseason so far, some of the things that they did add to what could be their finally pushing towards their rebuild. Well, in free agency, they added the likes of Miles Sanders, Von Bell, that safety, and receiver Adam Thielen. The only thing that they didn't really keep around was, Sam Darnold. He was a free agent. So going into this draft, obviously the biggest question, the reason why they made this trade to go from number 9 all the way up to number 1 and give away all the handful of resources was, it's pretty obvious what they're going to do. They're going to go and get a quarterback that can lead their franchise for the first time since Cam Newton in 2011. But obviously the biggest question is going to be which quarterback to pick, because they have all the cards. They have all the necessary choices over there. But obviously it's going to come down to which one they think is best and which one they think is best for new head coach Frank Reich. Some of the other things that they need to address is the offensive line. It wasn't necessarily that great last year, and now with DJ Moore out of Carolina, they're going to need a receiver, maybe even receivers. So they have at least 6 picks outside of this one to address those pressing needs. So they can get it done. Will they get it done though? That's the thing. So moving on to our next team that's going to be needing a lot is, the Houston Texans. And boy, did they fumble this up really bad. They could have been in the spot that the Carolina Panthers were in. So they finished with a 3-13-1 record. And looking back at their season, it went as expected that most people thought. They had a crappy roster and another one and done head coach in Lovie Smith, who, get this. He screwed the Texans out of the first overall pick by winning the very last game of the season. Yeah, he knew he was going to get fired by the owner. And you know what he did? Fuck him over. He fucked him over. And initially, at the time, gave the Chicago Bears, his old team that he coached, the number 1 overall pick. However, it seems like Houston smartened up, at least for now. They grabbed a familiar face and a coach with some success in former 49ers defensive coordinator DeMeco Ryans, who now, going to this draft, bases his first test in trying to rebuild the team in his vision, just as long as ownership, the front office, let him. So far, it's going to take some time because, you can't totally rebuild the team overnight. Some of the additions that they made so far was getting the safety in Jimmy Ward, and some okay options in receiver Robert Woods and tight end Dalton Schultz. They did lose one of their top edge rushers in Ogbunia Kwanu. I'm sorry if I can't pronounce that right. And perhaps their top receiver in Brandon Cooks, who they traded away to the Dallas Cowboys. Now, obviously, for the Houston Texans, they did so bad, mainly because, there's talent gaps all over the board. But perhaps their biggest draft need here at number 2 is going to be quarterback. Now, Davis Mills, their current quarterback, he wasn't terrible, but he didn't show enough to prove that he could be a long-term option. Keep in mind, he was drafted in the 3rd round in 2021. He showed some promise in his rookie year when he had to take over, but in 2022, it was eh. So the Texans have a prime opportunity to take a quarterback that wasn't taken by Carolina at number 1. They have to do it here because if you don't, what are you doing? You're just wasting your time. We're wasting a resource. Because when you consider all the other things that you have to address, like receiver, defensive line, offensive tackle, there are a lot of gaping holes that you still have to address that you didn't do in free agency if you're the Texans. And considering how many picks you have like a whole lot that you have. You have like 12 picks, including one later on, like 10 picks later. Not 10 picks, 10 picks later at number 12. Like, you can literally address all the other top needs later on. But at number 2, if you're the Texans, you have to go and get a long-term option, a franchise-altering option at quarterback. Because you don't have Deshaun Watson anymore, but you got to get someone. So moving on to the Arizona Cardinals, they ended their 2022 season 4-13, and man, their whole season was a bad mix of inconsistency, and poor coaching from Cliff Kingsbury, who lost his job at the end of the season. But the biggest story of that season was, well, their season spiraling down even further because quarterback Kyler Murray tore his ACL, and Arizona's not expected to have him back until at least a little bit later in the season. So he's expected to miss a few weeks of the regular season. I mean, I'm assuming at least because he tore it late in December. So, like I said, Cliff Kingsbury was fired, and then they brought in former Eagles defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon. Now he's tasked with retooling pretty much a broken team that must prepare for Kyler Murray, life without Kyler Murray for at least the first month of the regular season. So some of the things that the players that they added in free agency was linebacker Kaiser White, who was okay on the Philadelphia Eagles, and center Kelvin Beachum. But they did lose their top edge rusher that's not named J.J. Watt, in Zach Allen, corner Byron Murphy, and receiver Robbie Anderson. So, yes, they did lose J.J. Watt to retirement, and other than him, they need help at that position. So maybe here they go for the top edge rusher in this draft. And later on, they can also address the defensive line, the rest of the defensive line. They could also stand to use another running back because James Conner was okay in 2022. And since you lost Byron Murphy, you got to go get a cornerback. So for the Cardinals, they have 7 picks besides this one. So they have the resource. They have at least some resources to go and address some of these pressing needs in this draft. Moving on to the Indianapolis Colts. Man, what a season that was. There's a reason why they are in the top 5. Because when you look at why they were 4-12-1 in 2022, well, first of all, the Matt Ryan experiment, having another quarterback for 1 year. This time it was Matt Ryan. It was a total flop. Trading for Matt Ryan was bad, but man, the thing that topped it more was firing Frank Reich and then Jim Irsay, the owner, hiring ESPN analyst Jeff Saturday. Yes, Jeff Saturday as interim coach. That was something else. And then, as expected, to nobody's surprise, the Colts season went into total free fall. Fortunately for them, they hired an actual somewhat qualified candidate in former Eagles offensive coordinator Shane Steichen. But man, he's going to have his hands full in maybe, just maybe, if he's allowed to, being given the task of drafting a long-term quarterback. I mean, you're in this position for a reason. You have to go get a quarterback. I mean, if the Colts don't, if Jim Irsay and freaking Chris Ballard don't let Shane Steichen get a quarterback, they're out of their minds. They are freaking insane. If they go into the 2023 regular season with Gardner Minshew, who they signed in the offseason as their starting quarterback, or if Matt Ryan's still there, they are insane. They are nuts. Unbelievable. So they have to go and get a quarterback. They have to draft a long-term solution at quarterback because they haven't had one since Andrew Luck. And you know how they really fucked him over. So some of the things they also have to address is cornerback because they traded away Stephon Gilmore to the Cowboys. edge rusher, even though they technically already have Samson Ebicom, but they weren't really that good in the pass rushing department. So more help is definitely needed. And they can definitely use some help at safety. Now, moving on to the Seahawks. Just keep in mind, though, that this is supposed to be the Denver Broncos pick. But the Broncos traded for Russell Wilson last year in that massive haul. So this is the second and final part of their first round picks that they traded away. So Denver is not going to have that first round pick here. So for the Seattle Seahawks, they finished last year 9-8. They were expected to be fighting for this kind of draft position, but instead they got a resurgent year from veteran Geno Smith. And despite some up and down moments during the season, they got a surprise wildcard berth. They lost to the 49ers in a blowout, but their future may not be as grim as most thought. And yeah, you got 2 first round picks, especially considering where the Denver Broncos did, how poorly they did in this spot. This is technically not their first regular first round pick, but in this spot, you have options here in this area. So they didn't really do too much in free agency, but that's okay. They still have a bevy of picks in this draft. Like they have like 8 picks, including 20th overall later in round 1. But yeah, those 2 first round picks gives you options. They do certainly need like an edge rusher or an interior defensive lineman, which is their biggest pressing need. But when you look at their other draft needs, like a guard, they still need an interior offensive lineman at guard. They also could use another linebacker because even though they got back Bobby Wagner, they still could use some help there. But perhaps the biggest question, though, is should they go for a quarterback, maybe a long-term option at quarterback? Because, yeah, they re-signed Geno Smith to a 3-year deal. But was his 2022 just like an aberration, like an outlier? How do the Seahawks really know he's going to do well again in 2023? So I think for Seattle, maybe this is a good opportunity to go and grab one of the top 4 or 5 quarterbacks in this draft in this spot. This is a good spot for them to be in because they have options. It might not be there at number 20 once it gets there. So if you're Seattle, something to consider. And same thing with the 6th team on this list, the Detroit Lions. Now, originally this was supposed to be the LA Rams pick, but just like with Seattle, just like with the Broncos, they made a big trade 2 years ago to go and get Matthew Stafford from the Detroit Lions. So for the Rams, this is the 3rd and final traded first round pick that they gave to the Lions. So that was back in 2021. Going back to the Lions, though, they finished their season 9-8. They started off pretty poorly despite some solid offensive production, but they overcame that bad start to finish 9-8. They barely missed out on the playoffs, but they finished strong by dashing away the Packers' own playoff hopes. But yeah, just like it's Seattle, while the Lions have their needs to address, some of which they already did in free agency, like grabbing cornerbacks, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Emmanuel Mosley, and Cameron Sutton. You have options here. You have options here at number 6 and the eventual spot number 18. So looking at some of their draft needs, like defensive lineman, linebacker, they do need a tight end because they traded away T.J. Hawkinson at the trade deadline. Again, that big question here at number 6 is, do they go get that long-term option at quarterback? Now, Jared Goff did fine in 2022, but just like with Geno Smith, is that sustainable? Is that sustainable in 2023? If you're the Lions, this is also something you should consider. You have 2 first-round picks. Like, this opportunity doesn't come at you like very often, like with how poorly the Rams did. Like, this is a good chance for you to go and get your franchise QB if it's still there. If it's not there, then yeah, definitely go and address your biggest need, your biggest remaining need. But if you see someone that you do like at quarterback, I would go and take it. I would go and grab that brass ring if you're Detroit. So moving on to the next team, we finally move away from quarterback talk for a bit. Let's talk about the Las Vegas Raiders. They finished their season 6-11, and that's why they're in this spot. Mainly because, well, their first season with coach Josh McDaniels was one that never really got out of first gear. Unlike with the 2021 Cinderella run to make a playoff push, they were let down on both sides of the ball. And a sign of things to come, they shut down quarterback Derek Carr in the last 2 games. They eventually released Carr once the offseason began, and they rang in a new era by signing quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo. Yes. Rather than go and wait for a quarterback in the draft, they went on and signed Jimmy Garoppolo. So, Raiders fans, I don't know how you're feeling about this one still, but they weren't very active in free agency. Aside from getting Jimmy G, they went out and got another receiver by the name of Jacoby Myers. So a little bit of help for Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow, I guess. Again, they did lose Derek Carr, and they also traded away tight end Darren Waller to the Giants. Man, what the hell? So I guess for a big pressing need that they do have to address, they do have to address some part of their defense. And that part of the defense should be corner, because it was not great. Their cornerback play hasn't been great for a while. So maybe go and getting a top tier corner for the Raiders defense should be a must for the Las Vegas Raiders. Some other needs that they have to address should be like tightening up on that offensive line. They have a lot of picks in this draft. They have about 11, so they have plenty of opportunities to address like the interior at guard, center, and then the exterior at offensive tackle, both left and right. Like they can potentially make something happen with their offensive line. Have them compete with the current offensive line. Maybe even replace them. Who knows? Either way, they have to go and address the entire offensive line with these bevy of picks. And then maybe go and find another starting tight end because, well, you don't have Darren Waller anymore. So for the Raiders, now that you brought in Jimmy G, for heaven knows why, you got to go now support him. You got to go find some supporting help for him. Next up, we have the Atlanta Falcons at number 8. They managed to hover their way around this spot again because, once again, they overachieved with mostly the same crappy roster, and they stayed in the fight of a crappy NFC South division race until, well, they lost enough games late in the year for Coach Arthur Smith to say, hey, let's see what the rookie Desmond Ridder has to offer, huh? So they lost all those games except for one. And, well, now with Marcus Mariota out of the picture, they're about to see what Desmond Ridder has to offer in 2023. And obviously the biggest focus should be on getting Desmond Ridder some help. They definitely did so, I guess, in free agency already. They addressed mostly the defensive side of the ball by getting the likes of safety Jesse Bates, corner Mike Hughes, linebacker Bud Dupree, and Calais Campbell on the defensive line. But you would still need some help. I think the big areas that they do need help in is getting to the quarterback. And you start at edge rusher. They do need to do better at pressuring the quarterback, getting some sacks in, because they were not great in that area. So some of the other things that they could use some help in is at corner, even though they already got Mike Hughes, but he's just one man. He is just one man. And maybe linebacker. So they have about 7 picks to do it, but either way, you have to find some help for Ridder on the defensive side of the ball. Offensive side of the ball, well, you can find your way there. Now, for the team that was originally supposed to pick number 1, but they went down to number 9 because, well, they made that trade. And that is, of course, the Chicago Bears. And, well, man, they played some good Bears football to get to that position of number 1 and make that big trade. And, yeah, let's just say Bears football really paid off. And they did pretty well in doing so. So anyway, for the Bears, they got a good sum of picks back for trading the first overall pick, and they got maybe a top weapon for Justin Fields in receiver DJ Moore. Also in free agency, they also got linebacker Tremaine Edmonds and edge rusher DeMarcus Walker. And good thing for the Bears is that they really made everyone expendable in free agency, so they let them walk. So if you're the general manager for the Bears, Ryan Poles, you have to wonder now that you've pretty much gave Justin Fields a little bit of help at receiver. Now it's time to give him some proper protection because he didn't really do so yet. So here in this spot for the Bears, you have to go and find some exterior help because it was not great. So maybe they should go and get an offensive tackle. And then later on, with your 9 remaining picks, go and address the rest of the offensive line. And then, because you traded away your other, your defensive linemen in Robert Quinn and Roquan Smith, go and find some help in the defensive line department in the later rounds. So for the Bears, they have to continue building onward and upward in supporting Justin Fields if they plan on having him as their long-term starter. Now at number 10, we have the NFC champion Philadelphia Eagles. Now, keep in mind, the Eagles are in this spot because, well, this pick was supposed to be New Orleans, but the two teams made a draft day trade in 2022 for New Orleans making a jump to certain spots with the Eagles that resulted in the Eagles getting this pick from them. So anyway, for the Eagles, they finished their 2022 14-3 because, well, Jalen Hurts had an MVP-like year with the skill talent around him. And the Eagles went on to surge to the NFC's top seed, speed through the playoffs, and they just fell just short to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Now, the thing for the Eagles is they lost a good amount of players in free agency. And now both their coordinators are head coaches. So for Philadelphia, if they want to make another run into the Super Bowl, they got to retool. And that starts here with one of their 2 first-round picks. So probably their biggest need at this spot has to be corner. They did lose probably one of their best corners in C.J. Gardner-Johnson. And I don't know, man. James Bradbury at the other spot, maybe could be a good option, but I don't know if he can sustain it. We'll see. But they have to find someone to replace C.J. Gardner-Johnson because Greedy Williams was okay in Cleveland, but he's. They also have to find a replacement for Miles Sanders because I don't know if I would want to trust Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell for the long run. And they have to go and retool a bit on the defensive line because, well, they did lose Javon Hargrave. And at safety, they nearly lost freaking Darius Slay. So they do need to find a running mate with them. So for the Eagles, it's going to be a little bit tough because aside from the 2 picks that they have at 10 and later at number 30, it's kind of scarce for them to address all their needs in this draft. But can they though? We'll see. But don't be stupid with them. So anyway, at number 11, we have the Tennessee Titans. They finished the season 7-10, mainly because of, well, offensive woes, team-wide injuries, including the Ryan Tannehill, that quarterback. And yeah, they managed to stay afloat in a weak AFC South. All those issues eventually caught up to them. They lost the AFC South to the Jaguars. And yeah, they eventually purged a bit. They let go Bud Dupree, David Long, Gardner Davis, and Taylor Lewan, among others. They did at least replace those guys with linebackers Arden Key and Aziz Al-Shaair, corner Sean Murphy-Bunting. So it wasn't all that bad for Tennessee. But whoever's going to be the quarterback, whether it's Ryan Tannehill or Malik Willis or maybe even somebody else, get some help from them. Like, they don't have a receiver, like a good receiver on that team. And that's what they really need to address in this draft. Go and get a receiver. Go and get a top option at receiver, because the Tennessee Titans do not have one. They clearly felt the loss of trading away AJ Brown last year in that draft. So it's gonna be tough because, well, besides this pick right here, they only have 5 picks after that. So use this pick to address your top need, and that's receiver. Then use the other picks to address the offensive line. Go get a guard. Go get a tackle. Go and get another edge rusher. And then find another receiver. Either way, go and get a receiver at number 11. Now, as for the Houston Texans at number 12, who got this pick from the Cleveland Browns because of the Deshaun Watson trade last year. Well, they can use, now that they presumably would have had their quarterback, their new quarterback at number 2. At this point, number 12, they can use this spot to go and get maybe a weapon for that quarterback, or maybe an offensive lineman for that quarterback. But either way, they have options. They'll at least have options. Their best need for them at this spot. But my personal opinion, they should go and get a receiver for their new toy to play with. Next up at number 13, we have the New York Jets. What a disappointing season for the Jets in the past year. They finished 7-10 when they looked primed to break out thanks to their strong defense, but it was undone by the deep regression of Zach Wilson in his second year, both as a player and a locker room leader. And just the whole Jets QB play cost Gang Green a chance to make the playoffs in a long time. So a lot of this draft, though, is going to heavily depend on probably the biggest thing, the biggest elephant in the room at the time I'm making this, and the time I put this out. And that's if the Jets finally reach a deal to trade for Green Bay Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers. Now, obviously, Aaron Rodgers made his intentions well clear, I think about a month ago, that he wanted to go and play for the New York Jets, just like his protege, Brett Favre. But clearly, they've been stalling out on talks, which have been reignited recently. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what kind of deal is put in place. Is it going to come on draft night? Is it going to come after the draft? Before? Just like real well before the draft? We'll see. Either way, the Jets or the Packers, which we'll talk about in a bit, they haven't really made a move. They haven't really made a move. Neither team can really make a move in terms of making free agent moves because, well, they can't really come to an agreement in terms of what they want to give up for Aaron Rodgers. So, yeah. But in terms of what they could get, they could do in this draft, should they stay at number 13, is, well, get some protection for whoever's going to be a quarterback, a guard, or tackle. Because, the offensive line was all right in 2022, but it could certainly do better. The interior was kind of weak, though, so maybe getting a guard to beef it up, give that quarterback better protection. And some other things that they could address is shoring up, like getting some more pressure on the defensive line. So, yeah. So the Jets do have 5 picks, so there are some things that they don't really need to address, but a lot of it's going to depend on what Aaron Rodgers, the compensation for him is going to be. So going at number 14, we have the New England Patriots. And while they were an okay defensive team in 2022, they took a serious step back on offense thanks to, well, Mac Jones not having an offense coordinator, not having any skilled players aside from Jacoby Myers. And as a result, they stumbled around mediocrity, lost winnable games, lost out on a playoff berth for the second time in 3 years under Bill Belichick. Very disappointing for a head coach that had won, 6 Super Bowls with Tom Brady. Very disappointing. So at least, they gave Mac Jones a little bit of help in free agency, like game receiver Juju Schuster, tackle Calvin Anderson, and tight end Mike Gesicki. So yeah, it offset the loss of receiver Jacoby Myers and backup Damian Harris. So at least the Patriots did something in free agency. But now you have to go and get Mac Jones a little bit more protection. Maybe go and get a guard. Maybe go get a tackle. Perhaps that's their biggest need. You have to keep shoring up that protection for Mac Jones because he got hit a lot compared to his rookie year. He had protection in 2021. He had little to none in 2022. Some other things that they could use is maybe another receiving option for Mac and Cheese and another safety because, was it Devin or Jason McCourty? One of the McCourty twins retired for the Patriots, from the Patriots. So finding a replacement for Devin McCourty not going to be easy in this draft. They do have a lot of picks, though. So they do have 10 picks in this draft. So they'll just have to use it wisely. So they can use all those picks in the world to address all their needs. Now going back to the Green Bay Packers at number 15. And this was a very disappointing season for them. They finished 8-9, and a lot of it had to do with all the serious problems that Aaron Rodgers and the Packers faced on offense for much of the season. But for all those problems that they faced, they did go on a little winning streak to keep pace in the NFC wildcard race. But those problems came back to haunt them on the very last game against the Detroit Lions. They cost themselves a chance to get in the playoffs on the last game, and now uncertainty awaits for the Packers. Like with the Jets, their draft plan largely depends on what the deal is going to be with trading Aaron Rodgers to the Jets. So will it get done right before the draft, during the draft, after the draft? Like, this holdup is pretty serious right now at the time I'm making this. So that's why the Packers couldn't do anything, mainly because Aaron Rodgers has a big fat contract. The Packers can't add anyone in free agency. They can't do it right now. So they saw the likes of Allen Lazard go to the Jets. They saw edge rusher Jaron Reed leave in free agency. They also saw linebacker Chris Barnes leave. So either way, the Packers are in this holding pattern. And even though they should get a receiver, that's their biggest pressing need for Jordan Love, who is going to be their starting quarterback. If not, it's probably going to be Aaron Rodgers. But whether or not who is going to be the quarterback, their biggest draft need is a receiver. Enough with drafting a defensive end or a linebacker in the first round. You have to go and get help for your quarterback. Whether it's gonna be Aaron Rodgers somehow in some way or Jordan Love. Get the man under center some help in the air, please. So they do have 9 picks. Maybe it could be even more, depending on what happens with a Aaron Rodgers trade. But either way, they'll have plenty of picks to address other top draft needs like tight end, safety, the defensive line. But the biggest need that they have to address in round 1 is getting a receiver. Nothing else. A receiver. Please. Excuse me. At number 16, we have the Washington Commanders, and they didn't really command anything at all in 2022 because they quickly found out that trading for Carson Wentz as their commander wasn't going to work. And when he got injured, their familiar friend Taylor Heineke springboarded them to a decent winning streak to keep them in playoff contention. But once he started playing poorly too, Ron Rivera decided to go back to Carson Wentz. And yeah, that backfired. that really backfired because, yeah, Washington got eliminated from playoff contention. And, yeah, what was going to be a surprise wildcard berth for Washington evaporated. So now the Washington Commanders released Carson Wentz. They saw Taylor Heineke go to the Falcons. So they've seemingly put all their eggs in the basket on their now second-year quarterback, turn from who was a third-round pick, I believe, and Sam Howell, who did beat the Dallas Cowboys in the last game of the regular season. But he didn't really do anything in that game. But they've seemingly put all the eggs in the Sam Howell basket. They did at least get some insurance in backup quarterback Jacoby Brissett, but I feel like they could use a third quarterback in that room. The biggest draft need that they could use is a corner because the secondary was not all that great. Some other needs that the Washington Commanders could use is getting a center because they did lose their center in free agency, they did lose their center in free agency. They can also use a guard because, their offensive line was, again, not that great. They can also stand to get another tight end. And, like I said, maybe consider getting another quarterback in the draft. So they have at least 7 picks to do it after this one. So, a decent amount to go address your top needs. Next up, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers at number 17. And, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you have to start wondering, like, is this really where our ceiling is? Because that's what 2022 was. They finished 9-8. It took them a bit of a while to insert their rookie quarterback, Kenny Pickett, who they picked in last year's draft. He flashed some promise, and he was assisted by a solid defense. They almost made it to the playoffs. They also got a last-minute playoff spot, but just wasn't enough. So they at least retooled a bit by getting the likes of Cole Holcomb and Elandon Roberts on defense, along with Patrick Peterson at corner, and former Bucs safety Keanu Neal. But what about the offense? What about your offense? So that's why I feel like going into this draft for the Steelers, they need to go get another option aside from Pickett and George Pickens, their breakout rookie receiver from last year. They need to get another option for Kenny Pickett. So that's why in round 1 for Pittsburgh, they have to go and get another receiver. Some of their other needs that they have to address is maybe either a left or right tackle because, the exterior line was all right. But Kenny Pickett did notably take a lot of hits. And keep in mind, he was concussed twice. So the Steelers have to be very careful. They have to be very careful and assured that they protect them. And that starts up front with the offensive line. They can also get another corner because they did lose one of their top corners in Cameron Sutton in free agency. So maybe getting another corner could help them. But considering that they only have 5 picks after this one, they have to pick and choose what they want to address. Going back to the lines at number 18, this is their regular pick. And again, they have now, presumably, considering what they have done with the 6th pick, they have options here. They can go defensive lineman, tight end, maybe another receiver, maybe quarterback if they didn't do it number 6. And if there's a quarterback that they like that's here, if they somehow fall in here, they have options. Going back to my earlier point, they have options. At number 19, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And this was Tom Brady's final season. And unfortunately for them, it didn't go well. Despite winning a putrid NFC South, they battled and lost the war of season long of offensive inconsistency, and that caught up to them in their wildcard game against the Dallas Cowboys, where they got their butts whooped. And also, Father Time finally claimed Tom Brady, who went on to retire for good in the offseason, at least for right now. At least for now. And the Bucs managed to purge a good amount of its roster due to a tight salary cap. So they'll be using this draft to retool for a new era. So what I mean by purging a good amount of its roster, well, look at the likes of, well, tackle Donovan Smith, safeties Keanu O'Neal and Mike Edwards. Running back Leonard Fournette got released. Corner Sean Murphy Bunting also got released. And obviously, well, Tom Brady retired. And they couldn't really add anyone because, well, they were over $50 million over the salary cap. In other words, they were in debt. $50 million when the offseason started. So they had to do so much cost-cutting measures just to get back in the green. So for the Bucs here, now that they got like a quarterback room of Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask, who's going to be battling for the starting spot in this new era of Tampa Bay Bucs football, now they have to address probably a big need, and that's the offensive line, whether it be a tackle or a guard, because Tom Brady took a lot of hits with that offensive line significantly bad in 2022 in his last year. Some of the other things that they need to address, they do have a solid amount of picks with 7. Go get another safety to replace Keanu O'Neal and Mike Edwards. Go and get another linebacker. Go and address a defensive line that's not getting any younger. Go and find a tight end that you still haven't found a replacement for Rob Gronkowski. Either way, you have to find something for each and every one of these needs. 7 picks is a solid amount to do so. Now, going back to the Seattle Seahawks at number 20, this is the regular pick. And considering what they, like I said, with the Lions, considering what they have already done, at number, 5, they have options. Defensive line, linebacker, guard are some of their needs, pressing needs still. If they haven't done quarterback here, I don't know. Is it still an option? We'll see. But either way, we'll see what they want to do. Going to number 21, we have the LA Chargers. They finished their season 10-7. They finally got that playoff berth for Justin Herbert. But their ending to the season, not good at all. They decide to play a lot of their key players in a meaningless game by Brandon Staley's choice, and that led to injury, and they eventually blew a large halftime lead to the all-elite Jaguars in Jacksonville in their wild card game. They blew typical Clippers. So the LA Chargers now head into this draft needing to address some things. There are some things that they have to address because they didn't do so in free agency, even though they didn't really lose a lot of people. So that's kind of good for them. They did add linebacker Eric Hendricks, so that's kind of one thing that they already addressed. But I'd say one of the big things that they have to address is another defensive lineman. Like, they already have someone on the edge like Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, but they could use Stan to have someone in the interior because they didn't get enough interior pressure on quarterbacks. So maybe getting an interior defensive lineman to help them out, get some inside pressure, and maybe stop the run for the Chargers. Some other things that they could use Stan to get help for is maybe a backup receiver and maybe a running back, because the big story for the Chargers this offseason is of how Austin Eckler wants to get traded and how the Chargers are just letting him get traded. It hasn't happened yet, but yeah, they're already looking for his replacement. So the Chargers will have to find it here in this draft. So going to number 22, we have the Baltimore Ravens at 10 who finished their 2022 season at 10-7. Initially, it looked like a promising bounce back season, but it ended just about the same way their 2021 season ended. Despite clinching a playoff berth this time around, the Ravens lost Lamar Jackson to season-ending ankle injury. They couldn't overcome the limitations of, what they had, both from a physical standpoint and an offensive schematic standpoint. in their playoff loss to the Cincinnati Bengals. But perhaps the biggest question for the Baltimore Ravens is how they approach this draft. Not because of a trade or anything, but they're in a standstill with their quarterback, Lamar Jackson. He was an impending free agent, but the Ravens franchise tagged him. They gave him the non-exclusive franchise tag. In other words, he could technically go speak to teams. And he's like the restrictive free agent in NBA terms. So they're basically in this hold. They're basically in this binding pattern. So they're not sure like if they need to go and get another quarterback or wait until Lamar Jackson gets smartens up and then signs a solid long-term deal. But either way, the Ravens are in this holding pattern. But either way, they still managed to sign Odell Beckham Jr. to a modest deal. But they still managed a good amount of lost a good amount of players like guard Ben Powers and solid edge rusher Calais Campbell. Now, even though they did sign Odell Beckham Jr., they still could use some help at receiver. I mean, Odell Beckham Jr. He did pretty good for the Rams in their Super Bowl run, but I mean, he's not getting any old. He's not getting any younger. And could he help the Ravens receiving core, especially with Rashad Bateman there? Yeah, but in the long run, I don't know. I don't think so. So that's why the Ravens could stand to get another receiving option opposite Bateman and Beckham. So they should go and get another first round receiver here. Some of the other things that they have to address is corner, another cornerback, maybe another running back as well, an edge rusher, maybe the offensive line too. So something to consider for if you're the Baltimore Ravens. Now going to number 23, we have the Minnesota Vikings. And yeah, this season was definitely weird for Minnesota. They were the comeback kids in the NFC, which their clutch offense garnering many rallying wins for them. But the only reason they were the comeback kids is that their terrible defense put them in such situations. And, well, it finally caught up to them. They were not able to keep up with their terrible defense because, well, once they got to the playoffs, hosting that game against the Giants, it faltered. Their defense faltered. They took a little bit of steps towards that, addressing that bad defense. They fired their defensive coordinator, brought in a new one, in Brian Flores. I think it was Brian Flores. I don't remember. But either way, they also took steps on the players personnel department by bringing in corner Byron Murphy and edge rushers Marcus Davenport and Dean Lowry. They did lose Dalvin Thompson at defensive tackle and one of their best linebackers in Eric Kendricks. So going into this draft, if you're the Vikings, probably the biggest need that you need to address is corner, because bringing in Byron Murphy is definitely not enough to salvage your defense. And yeah, it was definitely the worst defense in the NFL last year because it puts you in those situations of where you had to come back and win those games, putting pressure on Kirk Cousins in that offense. So for the Vikings, you have to go and get another cornerback. Some of the other things that the Vikings should address in this draft, mainly it's the defense, like getting help in the interior defensive line, going and getting another linebacker to help out Eric Kendricks. Not Eric Kendricks. Whoever's going to be the linebacker there, and maybe another safety. So basically addressing the whole defense. Unfortunately for the Vikings, after this pick, it's going to be very hard to do so because, well, they only have 4 picks, so they have to pick and choose what they want to address in this draft. Now, going on to number 24, we have the all-elite Jacksonville Jaguars. Man, this season for that past season for them showed some glimpse, maybe show some flashes, maybe show some promise towards their future because, despite a little bit of a derailing start for them, they trended upwards in the second half because of a good second year for Trevor Lawrence and some late season surges from his supporting cast. And they became the AFC South champions that rallied back from a 28-0 hole in their wildcard game and made it as far as the divisional playoffs, even though they fell short to the Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah, Jacksonville may be onto something, especially with how the rest of the division is kind of trending downwards. So for Jacksonville, they should continue to build on maintaining the control of the division. So that starts in this draft, especially considering that they didn't really do anything in free agency. They literally waited until the draft to do so. I don't know why. I don't know how. They just did. Perhaps the biggest thing that they should address in this draft, just like many other teams, is corner. Because, yeah, their secondary was not all that great. It wasn't all that great in 2022. So getting a cornerback to bolster up some of their defense is a must. Some other needs that they should address in this draft is maybe getting a guard to protect Trevor Lawrence's interior protection, and getting maybe a backup tight end to go alongside Evan Ingram, but we'll see. They do have 7 picks, so they have a good amount of resources to invest some of their pressing needs. At number 25, we have the New York Giants, who, well, went on a little bit of a surprise run of sorts. They exceeded expectations in Brian Daboll's first year as coach in 2022, managed to secure a playoff berth, and while they upset the Vikings on the road, many of their limitations at different skill positions were on full display when they got their butts whooped. Not even before halftime ended against the Eagles in the divisional playoffs. So for the Giants, you at least have something going for yourselves. But I still very well question the decision to give Daniel Jones a big fat contract extension. But nonetheless, you must use this draft to build upon that better than expected last season. So the Giants didn't really do all that much aside from adding linebacker Bobby Okereke to that defense, which was okay, but not spectacular. But since you did re-sign Daniel Jones and franchise tag Saquon Barkley, the biggest thing that you do have to get for Danny Pennies is a receiver. You already released disappointment Kenny Golladay. Now you have to go and get a top option for Daniel Jones. Some of the things that the Giants do have to go and get is a center, because they did lose John Feliciano to the 49ers. A guard, because they did lose Nick Gates. So pretty much half of the offensive line. And another edge rusher, because, well, they didn't necessarily do all that well in the pass rush, because, well, Kayvon Thibodeau, their rookie linebacker, was a one-man crew. So they have 9 picks after this one, so they have plenty of opportunities to address their top needs. Next up, we have the Dallas Cowboys at number 26. So the Cowboys finished their 2022 just like they did in 2021 at 12-5. And most people like me expected them to be on a downslide of sorts. But they managed to be just fine. They managed to nab another playoff berth for the second straight year. And, well, despite a strong defense, what let them down again was Dak Prescott. His inconsistency cost the team when they needed him most. And guess against who? The 49ers. This time in the divisional playoffs on the road. And that ended another good season for them. So for Dallas, obviously you're questioning, maybe even wonder, like, keeping tabs on Dak Prescott in 2023. Maybe they should start considering that. But when you look at their offseason so far, they at least made some kind of big moves. Going out to get corner Stephon Gilmore to bolster a bit on that defense, getting help for Trayvon Diggs, trading for former Texans receiver Brandon Cooks to maybe go get another top option aside from CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup, and getting a backup running back in Ronald Jones, because, well, considering the move that they made by releasing Ezekiel Elliott, yeah, they need another option behind Tony Pollard. So one of the things that they do need to go and get a center. They do need to get a center because the offensive line for Dallas was still good, but they did manage to lose. I think they managed to lose their center in 2022 to injury. So they some of the other things that they do need to address is guard, because they lost Connor McGovern to the Bills. They do also need to get a tight end because they lost Don Schultz to the Texans, and a safety. If they want to keep that strong defense going, they have to do better in the secondary. So they have a solid amount of picks after this one at 7, so they can find a way to get it done. Next up, we have the Buffalo Bills at number 7. Number 27. Man, I thought the Bills were. It's going to be the Bills. That was going to be the Bills' years in 2022. They were picked as the perennial preseason Super Bowl favorite this past season, but they just experienced one too many emotional tolls on and off the field, and that greatly affected the team towards the end of the season. And as such, another strong campaign for Josh Allen and company came to a disappointing halt. This time at home in the divisional game against Cincinnati. So, yeah, all the Bills can do right now is look to regroup and reconfigure, bounce back from what was an emotional roller coaster that was 2022. Now, for the Bills, they didn't necessarily add or lose anybody significant, but they do need to do something in this draft. Probably the biggest thing that they have to address is linebacker, because they did lose Tremaine Edmonds, one of their key pieces in that defense. But yeah, they have to go and add somebody in this draft. Some of the other things that they do have to address is maybe going and get another receiver, because Gabe Davis in 2022 was disappointing compared to 2021, where he had his breakout year. 2022 was a disappointment for Gabe Davis. So going and get another option opposite Stephon Gilmore and Gabe Davis is a must also as well for the Bills. And maybe addressing a little bit on the offensive line, because a lot of why Josh Allen had to run so much was because the protection was pretty poor for the Bills. So they have about 6 picks after this one, so they can get it done. At number 28, we have the Cincinnati Bengals, who finished their 2022 12-4. They almost completed their Super Bowl redemption story in 2022, but they just couldn't get it done in a rematch against the Chiefs in the AFC title game. But they proved that they can compete for years to come, and they can use this draft to continue to build their jungle. So, looking at what they had done so far in free agency, they managed to, again, retool the offensive line a bit by going out and getting tackle off Orlando Brown Jr. and a little bit of the defense as well, replacing safeties Jesse Bates and Von Bell with former Rams safety Nick Scott. So, obviously, they should continue to do so by finding another safety, finding another corner. But perhaps their biggest need should be at guard, because they faced a little bit of late season injuries at that spot, which significantly affected the Cincinnati Bengals offense and how well they did in that AFC title game. Just like in the previous AFC title game, Joe Burrow was getting sacked a ton, but they at least were able to overcome that. But they couldn't do so back in January of this year. So, Bengals have about 6 picks to go through to address their top needs. So, I think they can address at least most, if not all, their needs here that I mentioned. At number 29, we have the New Orleans Saints, and now originally this was supposed to go to my 49ers, but I'll try to explain why this pick doesn't belong to them. So basically, they lost this pick because back in 2021, they traded like a whole lot of things to go from like number 12 to number 3 to go and grab Trey Lance with the Miami Dolphins. And then the Miami Dolphins later traded this late first round pick to the Denver Broncos as part of the linebacker Bradley Chubb trade. And then Denver finally traded it to the New Orleans Saints as part of a trade package to acquire the rights for head coach Sean Payton. Yeah. Yeah. That it is so hard to explain in a nutshell. So for the Saints, though, this first season without Sean Payton was just as much as you expected from New Orleans. Not great, not terrible, just very mediocre. Especially considering that, they did have Jameis Winston for like 2 games, but once he continued to have some like lingering injury issues, they went over to Andy Dalton and never really went back to Jameis Winston. Especially considering how mid Andy Dalton was on not just himself, but on the whole offense. And Dennis Allen just never really went back to Jameis Winston. So, yeah, the Saints weren't outright terrible. It was just like, man, they could have been, they could have been a little bit more. But they'll look to a better direction as they acquired former Raiders quarterback and Dennis Allen's former quarterback, now turned current quarterback, Derek Carr. So for the Saints, they obviously added Derek Carr in the offseason. They also added some help in the pass rush in Nathan Shepard and backup running back Jamal Williams. They did lose another edge rusher in Marcus Davenport, David Onyemata, and linebacker Caden Ellis. So perhaps defense is the way to go if you're the Saints in this spot because, well, considering you lost some help in the pass rushing department, you're going to need some help for Cameron Jordan, who's not getting any younger, whose play kind of declined a bit. So finding an edge rusher is a must for the New Orleans Saints. Other top needs in this draft include getting a linebacker to replace Caden Ellis, finding a corner because, the cornerback play wasn't exactly great. The secondary was and finding a receiver because, well, Michael Thomas is always in and out of the lineup. You don't really have another option opposite Chris Olave. So, for the Saints, they have 8 picks after this one, so they can definitely address most of those needs. And then for the Philadelphia Eagles at number 30, this is their regular pick. Obviously, whatever they didn't pick at number 10, whether it is running back, defensive line, safety, they could do so here. Now for the final pick in this round 1, that is the Kansas City Chiefs, who were expected to take a slight downturn after trading away Tyreek Hill to the Miami Dolphins and the AFC having loaded up in the previous offseason. The Chiefs instead overcame that thanks to another MVP-like year from Patrick Mahomes, who actually did become the MVP, and the new tactic of spreading the wealth and, throwing it to guys not named Travis Kelce. They went on to win their second Super Bowl title in 3 years against the Philadelphia Eagles. And now for the Chiefs, it's all about trying to defend that second title. But while they got a great year out of Patrick Mahomes, him making every mid receiver not named Kelce is not going to be something that can be viable long term. For the Chiefs, your biggest draft need has to be receiver. This is something that they should address in round 1. Maybe if they can get away with it in round 2, in round 2, but their top need should be receiver because there are times where they kind of struggled, in the passing game because, well, the receivers like Juju Smith-Schuster and Marquez Valdes-Scantling were they were just like middling. They're just middling. So some of their other draft needs include getting an edge rusher to help out Charles Omenihu because, well, Frank Clark was released, and getting some help in the interior defensive line to help out Chris Jones. So for the Chiefs, if they want to defend their Super Bowl title, they have to go get more help for Patrick Mahomes, like finding that top receiving option for him. They have 9 picks after this one, so definitely can address those needs in just about every way. Now, looking at the teams without a first round pick that are going to have to wait till day 2, let's look at the Denver Broncos. And I talked about this in my season recap. They remain the most disappointing team because, well, they made that big trade last offseason for former Seahawks quarterback Russell Wilson. And, well, like I said, biggest disappointment in the NFL because Wilson and the offense were massively underachieved. And Coach Nathaniel Hackett, in his head coaching role, was unable to adapt. He couldn't adapt to a lot of situations. He got fired after Christmas. Don't even get me started on how they got roasted by Patrick Starr in that game against the Rams. So, either way, the Broncos made another offseason trade for the services of former Saints head coach Sean Payne. But either way, they have a lot of work to do with so little resources that they traded away. They traded away these draft resources because of those big trade packages that they did. So, looking at some of the moves that they made in the offseason, they got tackle Mike McGlinchey. Have fun with that one. Guard Ben Powers, edge rusher Zach Allen, and backup Samaje Perine. So, those losses that they had, like Draymond Jones, it was definitely offset by the additions that they had. Looking at where they're going to pick first, the 67th pick, I mean, it's a decent spot to start. But considering how many picks they have total, just 5. Yeah. And considering what they need, like a center or guard, and along with a defensive line and a linebacker, the Broncos' resources are very scarce in this draft. So if they want to bounce back big in 2023, they're going to have to pick and choose what they want to do. Now, for the LA Rams, they were expected to at least make the postseason after winning Super Bowl 56, but injuries to Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp, along with free agency departures at key spots, caused a huge free fall for the defending champions. And it didn't get any better during this offseason. Their free fall turned into a spiral. Their limited money resources forced them to trade away their top corner, Jalen Ramsey, to the Dolphins, and their possible backup option, Baker Mayfield, signed with the Tampa Bay Bucks in free agency. So their insurance policy option in Mayfield was gone in the event that Matthew Stafford was unable to play this year, or he decided to, retire for him and for reasons. So, considering what the Rams were going through, they couldn't do anything. They managed to see a lot of people leave, like Ramsey, Matt Gay, Odell Beckham Jr., Bobby Wagner, Leonard Floyd. Most of a good amount of guys that were on that Super Bowl roster a year or so ago, not there anymore. So the good thing for the Rams, though, you don't have to wait too long to make your first pick on day 2. You're picking 36 overall, so you don't have to wait that long. But what you do need to do is at least get some protection for Matthew Stafford if he is going to play. He's not going to call it quits, and it doesn't seem like he's going to call it quits yet. So they should go pick offensive line, whether it's at guard or at tackle. It should be tackle, though, because you still haven't found a replacement for Andrew Whitworth yet. So go and address the offensive line first. Now, again, fortunately for the Rams, you have 9 total picks. So definitely a lot of opportunity to go and address the offensive line, address cornerback, find Jalen Ramsey's replacement, find Bobby Wagner's replacement, and Leonard Floyd, who got released. Find some help for Aaron Donald at edge rusher and interior defensive line. Find a tight end. At least this time around for the Rams, if they want to retool a bit, and maybe actually a lot, you have 9 picks to do so. Less need. Don't mess it up if you're in that position. I'm saying this as a Niner fan, but I'm trying to help you out, man. I'm just trying to help you out a bit. Now for the Cleveland Browns, their 2022 just, well, it went as expected, considering that their new big trade acquisition, Deshaun Watson, missed most of the season due to suspension. A team with a lot of gaping holes didn't do so well. Jacoby Brissett, at least, in his last game as a starter, it went out with a bang, beating Tom Brady in the Bucs. And when Deshaun Watson did come back for the last month of the season, he had a lot of rust to shake off. And yeah, it had some mixed results. So the Browns pretty much used 2022 to find out what it had in most of its roster, to find out what Deshaun Watson had in store for next year. So yeah, you can't really make the skid marks on what their season was in 2022. So for this offseason, they used it to boost the defensive side of the ball, because that was one big weakness in this past season. But, they could also get a little bit more help for Deshaun as well. So they do pick at number 74th in day 2. While, yeah, I do say offense for Watson, they can also use some help for their biggest guy on defense, and that is Myles Garrett. So maybe getting someone on the interior defensive line is their top need. Some of their other needs include like getting a linebacker, getting a running back, and maybe getting another receiver for Deshaun Watson. Good thing for the Browns is they have a solid amount of picks, 8, unless they trade it away. But either way, not a bad ideal number of picks for the Browns. For the Miami Dolphins, who are have, unfortunately, very scarce amount of picks in this one. But as for the 2022, it had some promising signs for them, but things start to slowly derail because of, this whole situation with Tua Tagovailoa's 3 concussions throughout the season, and just the overall handling Miami had on it. And then late in the season, you started to see middling defensive play, odd coaching decisions from their first-year head coach Mike McDaniel, which eventually cost them their first-round matchup against the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo. So for the Dolphins, they'll at least have their quarterback Tua healthy and not retired, because he did consider that for the coming season. But they gotta freaking help him out. They gotta find him some protection up front. And unfortunately for them, their resources are scarce. They only have 4 total picks in this draft because they traded away a good amount of those picks to the Kansas City Chiefs and a good amount of those picks to the Denver Broncos. Yeah, not good. Not good at all. So at least for them, they did make those moves will seemingly on paper pay off with the additions of Jalen Ramsey on defense, linebacker David Long in free agency, and safety Deshaun Elliott. But they did lose their top tight end option in Mike Gesicki. But I mean, you can overcome that when you have Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill at receiver. But you do kind of need that middle option in the middle of the field. But again, the problem is, how are you going to address a lot of your needs when you only have 4 picks? Your biggest need is guard. They need interior protection for Tua. Really. Some of their other draft needs include getting a tight end, finding Mike Gesicki's replacement, finding another linebacker aside from David Long. It's just, they picked at number 51. What the problem is that they don't have a lot of picks to address many of their needs in this draft. And last but not least, what better way to end this episode, to end my Filthy Casual preview to this draft with, of course, my team. And that is, of course, the San Francisco 49ers. And their season prior was, well, kind of like those books that you read. It's kind of like not really like the Disney movies without the happy ending in them. Because this season was supposed to be the Trey Lance show. It's basically supposed to be the Trey Lance show, but then he got injured, and then here comes Jimmy Garoppolo, to the chagrin of me and many others, but to the delight of many other people, unfortunately. So after he shook off some bad eggs and the whole team shook off some bad eggs, they acquired Christian McCaffrey at the trade deadline. They found ways to win, different ways to win. And after Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt, they then were forced to turn to the third stringer, Mr. Irrelevant, who actually managed to become Mr. Relevant, Brock Purdy, who he managed to play pretty well in stepping up for both of his injured quarterbacks. And he went on to help the 49ers go as far as the NFC Championship game. Again, just very unfortunate that he got hurt. Fourth stringer quarterback Josh Johnson also got hurt in that game in Philadelphia. And yeah, that ending to the season still hurts. It still hurts. Could have gotten there. We could have gotten there. We could have gotten to Arizona. But it is what it is at this point. So when it comes to this draft for the 49ers, you absolutely have to beef up the offensive line. Like, you pick 99th overall in this draft, but they do have 10 total picks. And thank God for the compensatory picks, because otherwise they won't be able to address a good amount of their needs. The biggest draft need that they need to address, though, is the right side of the line. Offensive right tackle. Mike McGlinchey, for all of us Niners fans out there, are blessed. Thank you, Denver, for taking him away from us. Because he is now your problem. He was butt cheeks. He was a penalty machine. So, either way, we have to find a new right tackle. Some other things we have to find is maybe some depth at guard. Maybe even like a left tackle. You don't know how long Trent Williams is going to be there. But either way, like the entire offensive line should be the top priority in this draft, because I don't want a repeat of 2022, man. Whether it was Trey Lance, Jimmy G, or Brock Purdy, that offensive line was butt cheeks. It was total butt cheeks, whether you want to see it or not. They do also have to address corner because they did lose Emmanuel Mosley. And yeah, we do have some. We did get a corner in Isaiah Oliver, but it never hurts to add some depth at that position. They also need to get a safety. They need to replace Jimmy Ward, and maybe get a third string quarterback, maybe, because let's get into the point that I wanted to talk about to end this episode. Apparently, there's been some talk about there's this talk about trade ideas, trading Trey Lance for what? Like the Niners having some trade talks, trade discussions about trading Trey Lance to the Minnesota Vikings, trading Trey Lance to the Tennessee Titans, trading Trey Lance to the Indianapolis Colts. Why? Why would the 49ers trade Trey Lance? Now, that's not to say that I am defending Trey Lance in the slightest, because he's good and all that, but we haven't seen anything. We haven't seen him fully play yet. Like a full at least half season of game yet. We don't know what he's truly capable of yet. And worst of all, it's people want to trade away Trey Lance when we don't know what Brock Purdy, he's going to be ready for the season. We don't even know if Brock Purdy's going to be ready for the season with the elbow injury that he suffered in Philadelphia. He looked pretty good, with his elbow recovery when he was at the Giants game, but is he going to be ready to throw come training camp? Is he going to be fully healthy come week 1 of the regular season? I'm not a medical expert, but these are questions that still need to be had. So all I'm saying is that if the Niners actually go through with trading Trey Lance to another team without knowing the full extent of how Brock Purdy's recovery is going, people in that building need to be fired. People in that building need to be fired. I'm not specifically saying it has to be John Lynch. It has to be Kyle Shanahan. Maybe it has to be. But either way, people in that building have to be fired because apparently they cannot handle a quarterback room. Like at all. And I know that's me speaking out of emotion, but hey, that's what we do here on Very Cold Lasagna. At the end of the day, you have to keep Trey Lance. Like, yes, you don't know what you have in him, but how can you not know what you have in him when you don't put him out there on the field and see what you got? Let him compete with Sam Darnold. Let him compete with Brock Purdy if he can throw in training camp. Let's see if he can win the job. Let's see who can win the job. If Trey Lance is not going to be the starter, then let him stay there and then deal with him. Then deal him during the season or something. If Brock Purdy's not ready to go, then let Trey Lance and Sam Darnold battle it out and have Trey Lance earn it. Do not trade him away during this NFL draft because the 49ers are going to be looking very stupid once and if Brock Purdy's not ready to go and all they have left is Sam Darnold. All they have is Sam Darnold and nobody else. Do you really want a repeat of the NFC title game except extended for whoever knows how long until Brock Purdy's ready to go? I don't know. Maybe it might be a little bit of a I don't know how do you call it? Scare for me. I'm just looking at it from my standpoint, okay? I'm just saying you want to have as many options as you can. And that these options include keeping Trey Lance and having him stay around to compete with Sam Darnold and Purdy and see if he can win the job. Like, see if, just in case that Purdy's not ready to go. And what if Purdy doesn't pan out? Just saying. And we'll see. All I'll say is just, we'll see. Do not trade Trey Lance right now. So anyway, that is your Filthy Casuals guide to the 2023 NFL Draft. A lot to cover. This is a pretty lengthy episode. If you made it this far, I truly appreciate you. I hope you're all ready for this draft. Some of you are, some of you aren't still, but that's okay. That's why come Thursday, April 27, we will know whose name will be called and whose name will be not. But either way, at least with the draft, they do a good job of explaining who these players are. Like, the analysts do a good job of who they are, what they're good at, what they're not good at. Unlike with WWE. That's all I can tell you with these like promos and vignettes and stuff. But anyway, let me know your thoughts on the upcoming NFL draft this week and what you're excited for, what each team needs, what your team needs. I'd like to know your thoughts, and let's start a discussion about it, whether it's in the comments on YouTube or a message on social media at Very Cold Lasagna on Twitter and Instagram. But anyway, that's it for this episode of Very Cold Lasagna, this very long episode number 140 of this icy yet spicy podcast. I am your host, DylanLasagna, signing off. And as always, keep that lasagna very cold in the fridge with your takes on the world of sports. Make sure to go back and listen to all the other episodes of this icy podcast. And until next time, peace out.